Failure to maintain property, $200 per day. That's the violation the HOA president sent me. While she was sleeping in my bed, cooking in my kitchen, and hosting book clubs in my living room. She fined me for not maintaining the house she was living in. I was on a federal project in Montana. My house was locked. My cameras were rolling. And for 6 weeks, Brenda Covington treated my home like her personal resort. She changed my locks, painted my dead wife's bedroom pink, redirected my mail to her P.O. box. She had no idea 3 hidden cameras caught every night, every meal, every friend she invited over. She had no idea a federal postal inspector was already building a case, and she definitely had no idea I was standing in my own kitchen behind her before the handcuffs clicked. Drop your craziest HOA story below. I need to take you back about 2 months before that Friday night, because what Brenda Covington did to my house didn't start with moving in. It started with a clipboard and a fake smile. My name's Garrett Townsend, 47 years old, federal bridge engineer, which is a fancy way of saying I spend my life making sure concrete and steel don't fail when 18-wheelers roll across them. I've lived in Palmetto Bluff Estates outside Charleston, South Carolina for 11 years. 4-bedroom colonial, wraparound porch, a live oak in the backyard that drops acorns like hail every October. The humidity down here clings to your skin like a wet towel by 9 in the morning. And the wood on the porch railings always smells like rain, even when it hasn't rained in a week. My wife Catherine picked the house. She loved that porch. She'd sit out there with sweet tea and a book while our daughter Ellie practiced violin inside, and the sound would float through the screen door and mix with the tree frogs singing in the ditch behind the fence. Catherine died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 14 months from diagnosis to funeral. Ellie was 11 when it happened. She's 14 now, plays first chair in her school orchestra, and handles more grief with more grace than most adults I know. Now, every neighborhood has one. That person who decides the homeowners association is a government, and she's the president, the legislature, and the Supreme Court all rolled into one pantsuit. Ours was Brenda Covington. 54 years old, bottle blonde bob, Chanel sunglasses even at the mailbox, white linen blazer over yoga pants like she was running for office at a farmer's market. She drove a pearl white Cadillac Escalade and parked it sideways in her driveway, so everyone on the street had to look at it. Brenda had run the HOA for 9 years. Her husband Dale sat on the Charleston County Planning Commission, which meant if you had a problem with Brenda, the county wasn't going to help you either. She fined people for flowers that were the wrong shade of pink. She fined a retired couple because their trash can was visible from the street for 31 minutes after pickup. She once cited a family for an unapproved exterior modification that turned out to be a wind chime. I'd been on her list ever since I voted against a 40% dues increase 2 years earlier. She looked at me across the meeting table and said, "I don't make the rules, Garrett. I just make sure everyone follows them, especially you." The way she said especially, slow, deliberate, smiling, told me everything I needed to know about how the next few years were going to go. Then the Federal Highway Administration assigned me to a bridge replacement project in rural Montana, 6 to 8 weeks on site. I couldn't take Ellie out of school that long, so she went to stay with my sister Diane in Savannah. I locked the house, set the alarm, activated 5 security cameras I'd installed myself, 2 outside covering the porch and driveway, 3 hidden inside in places you'd never notice unless you knew to look, and drove to the airport with my toolbox and a duffel bag. The cameras were my one concession to paranoia. Catherine used to tease me about them, but I'm an engineer. I measure twice, document everything, and assume that anything that can fail eventually will. The cameras fed to an app on my phone, sent motion alerts, and backed up to a cloud server every 12 hours. I figured the biggest threat while I was gone was a package thief or a raccoon in the trash cans. I had no idea the biggest threat was already living 3 houses down. 10 days in, my phone buzzed at 2 in the afternoon, Montana time. Motion alert. Front porch camera. I was standing on a temporary bridge deck 40 feet above the Missouri River, checking bolt torque on a steel girder connection, when the notification popped up. I pulled off my glove and tapped the app. The screen filled with the image of Brenda Covington, walking up my front steps like she was arriving at a Sunday open house. Clipboard in one hand, measuring tape in the other. She stood on my porch, looked left, looked right, scribbled something on her form, then disappeared around the side of the house toward the back gate. The gate I'd padlocked before I left. 20 seconds later, the backyard camera caught her. She'd come through the neighbor's yard and over the low section of my fence where the ivy grows thick enough to hide the gap in the slats. She stood in my backyard with her hands on her hips, scanning every window like she was appraising the place. Then she walked to the side wall where the lockbox was bolted behind the AC unit. That lockbox was a mistake I'll own forever. I'd installed it 2 years ago when a plumber needed access while I was at work. 4-digit combination lock. Default code 0000. I'd meant to remove it after the job was done. Never got around to it. Never changed the factory code either. An engineer who lectures about redundancy left the default password on his own key safe. Catherine would have roasted me for a week over that one. Brenda punched in the zeros. The box popped open with a metallic click that the microphone picked up clean. She took the spare key, walked to the back door, and let herself into my house. I watched on my phone as she moved through every room. Kitchen first. She opened the refrigerator, checked the pantry shelves, ran her finger along the granite countertop like she was checking for dust. She opened drawers. She looked inside cabinets. Then she wandered into the living room and sat down on my couch. Catherine's couch. The sage green sectional we picked out together at a furniture store in Mount Pleasant the year Ellie started kindergarten, and turned on the television. She sat there for 10 minutes, shoes still on, her leather purse resting on the cushion beside her like she was settling in for a long evening. My chest was tight. My hands were shaking, and not from the November wind cutting across the bridge deck. It was something deeper, something that feels like a stranger reaching into the one place in the world that's supposed to be yours and touching everything you thought was safe. I called her. She picked up on the second ring, and her voice came through sweet and sandpapery at the same time. "Brenda, why are you inside my house?" "Oh, Garrett, honey, Mrs. Patterson next door noticed a water stain on your exterior wall. I popped in to check for interior damage. Standard HOA procedure. You should really be thanking me." "Get out. And don't go in my house again. I mean it." I was trying to help Garrett, but fine. Your property, your problem. She hung up. I stood on that bridge deck in Montana and stared at the river for a long time, phone still warm in my hand. Something was wrong. Not just the intrusion itself, the comfort of it. She walked through my home like she'd done it 100 times before. That night, I called Mrs. Patterson. Sweet woman, 72 years old, feeds the cardinals from a wooden tray on her back porch every morning at 7. "Water stain? No, honey, I never said anything about a water stain. I haven't talked to Brenda in weeks. Honestly, that woman gives me the creeps." Brenda lied. She fabricated a neighbor's complaint to justify walking into my home. And here's something most people don't know. Under South Carolina Code Section 1611-600, entering someone's residence without clear, explicit consent, even if you have a physical key, constitutes criminal trespass. An HOA president has zero legal authority to enter a private home. None. Her clipboard is not a warrant. Her title is not a badge. I didn't call the police that night. Instead, I did what an engineer does when he spots a crack in a load-bearing structure. I opened a spreadsheet, time-stamped every frame of footage, backed it up to a second cloud server, and started building a file. Because something told me Brenda Covington was not finished with my house. Not even close. 6 days later, she came back. And this time, she brought groceries. Day 20. The kitchen camera caught Brenda walking through my back door at 11 in the morning, carrying 2 paper bags from Trader Joe's. She set them on the counter, unpacked them one by one. Pasta, jarred sauce, a bottle of olive oil, a bag of pre-washed salad, a block of Parmesan, and a bottle of Pinot Grigio, and started cooking in my kitchen. My wife's kitchen. She used Catherine's cast iron skillet, the one with the wooden handle that Catherine seasoned herself over 10 years of Sunday breakfasts. I watched Brenda scrape a spatula across the surface without a second thought, and I felt something tear inside my chest that had nothing to do with trespassing law. She set the dining table, one place setting, my dishes, my silverware, my cloth napkins that Catherine picked out. She sat down and ate spaghetti at my dining table like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then she washed the dishes, dried them, put them back exactly where they'd been, wiped the counter, and sat down on the couch with her wine. She watched television for 3 hours. 3 hours. Then she turned off the lights and left. 2 days later, she came back with a pillow and a fleece blanket. She napped on the sofa for 2 hours in the middle of the afternoon. The camera caught her shoes by the door, her reading glasses on the end table, her phone charging with a cord she'd brought from home. She was nesting. By day 25, Brenda arrived with a small rolling suitcase. She unpacked it in the guest bedroom, hung blouses in the closet, stacked folded pants on the shelf, placed her toiletries in the guest bathroom, shampoo, conditioner, a pink razor, face cream lined up on the counter like she was checking into a hotel she'd booked 6 months in advance. I was sitting in a motel room in Big Timber, Montana, watching all of this on a 7-inch phone screen. The wind outside rattled the window frame. Inside, my hands were steady, but my jaw was locked so tight I could hear my own teeth grinding. I called Warren Prescott. Warren is a real estate attorney in Charleston. We went to Clemson together. He's the kind of lawyer who wears boots to court and wins anyway. Warren, she's living in my house. What happens if I call the cops right now? He was quiet for a second. Then he said something that changed everything. You'll get a trespassing charge filed. She'll get a slap on the wrist, maybe a night in holding, probably not even that. First-time misdemeanor. She'll cry in front of a judge, say it was HOA business, and walk out with the fine she'll pay from the HOA treasury. But listen to me carefully, Garrett. If she keeps going, if she establishes residency, if she's sleeping there, eating there, receiving mail there, that's not trespassing anymore. In South Carolina, that's burglary in the first degree. That's a felony, up to 15 years. Burglary isn't what most people think. You hear the word and picture someone in a ski mask kicking in a door at midnight. But legally, burglary means entering a structure without consent, with the intent to commit a crime inside. And that crime can be as simple as using someone else's property without permission. What Brenda was doing checked every box. Warren's advice was simple. Let her dig. Every day she stays adds another count. Document everything, and don't let her know you're watching. So I didn't. I let the cameras run. I backed up every file to 3 locations: cloud server, external hard drive mailed to Warren's office, and a USB stick I kept in my motel room safe. Redundancy, an engineer's best friend. Then I found something that turned a state felony into a federal case. I'd been checking my mail through the USPS Informed Delivery app, the service that scans your incoming letters and shows you images before delivery. 3 pieces of mail addressed to me at my home hadn't arrived. I checked the tracking. They'd been forwarded. Someone had filed a change of address form, redirecting my mail to a P.O. box in North Charleston. A P.O. box registered to Brenda Covington. Under federal law, 18 U.S.C. Section 1708, redirecting someone's mail without their written consent is mail fraud. It's a felony, punishable by up to 5 years in federal prison. Brenda hadn't just moved into my house. She'd started stealing my identity one envelope at a time. I saved the screenshots, forwarded everything to Warren, and sat on the edge of that motel bed in Montana listening to the wind howl across the plains. I didn't sleep much that night, but I wasn't scared. I was building something. And then Brenda decided to throw a party. Day 30. The living room camera captured it in high definition. 5 women seated around my coffee table, wine glasses catching the lamplight, a cheese board spread across the surface next to a stack of paperback novels nobody was reading. Brenda sat in the center of the couch, my couch, legs crossed, glass of red wine in her hand, laughing louder than anyone else in the room. She was hosting, in my home, with my electricity, my furniture, my wine. The wine. I need to stop on that for a second because it matters more than it should. Catherine and I took a trip to Napa Valley in the fall before her diagnosis. She was already tired in ways we didn't understand yet, but she wanted to go. We drove up from San Francisco on a Saturday morning, windows down, the golden hills rolling by like a postcard neither of us wanted to put down. We tasted wine at 4 vineyards, and she bought a case of Merlot from a small family operation in Calistoga that she said reminded her of the way her grandmother's kitchen smelled. Rich and warm and a little bit wild. She kept those bottles in the pantry cabinet above the refrigerator and opened one every anniversary. There were 3 left when she died. Now Brenda Covington was pouring one of them for her book club, pouring it into my glasses in my house while sitting on my couch, and she didn't even know the name of the woman who picked it. I watched the footage and felt a kind of anger I didn't know I had. Not the loud kind, the kind that settles into your bones and stays quiet and doesn't leave. One of Brenda's friends looked around the living room and asked, "Brenda, whose house is this again?" Brenda didn't miss a beat. "Oh, it belongs to some engineer who's never here. He basically abandoned the place. I'm doing the neighborhood a favor, keeping an eye on things." Abandoned. She called my home, the home Catherine picked, the home Ellie grew up in, the home I've paid a mortgage on for 11 years. Abandoned. Like it was a shed by the highway. 2 days later, Brenda called a locksmith. I watched it happen live on the porch camera. A white van pulled up, a man in a gray polo got out with a tool bag, and Brenda met him at the front door. The morning sun was sharp, and the shadow of the porch overhang cut a clean line across the steps. "You the homeowner?" the locksmith asked. "I'm the HOA president. The owner authorized me to manage the property while he's away. He's overseas on a military contract." 2 lies in 1 sentence. I never authorized anything, and I'm a civilian engineer, not a defense contractor. She said it without blinking. The locksmith shrugged, changed the deadbolt in 15 minutes, handed her both new keys, and drove away. Just like that, I was locked out of my own house, by a woman who didn't own a single square inch of it. I called Warren. "She changed my locks. Can I still get into my own house?" "You own the deed. You can call a locksmith anytime and they'll let you right in. But don't. Not yet. Every day she holds those keys is another piece of evidence. Let the clock run, Garrett." The clock was running. But I needed more than camera footage. I needed someone on the ground who could tell me what Brenda was saying to the rest of the neighborhood. I called Pete Gallagher. Pete lives directly across the street from me. Retired Charleston PD, 23 years on the force, spent the last 8 coaching Little League and building birdhouses in his garage. The man is made of oak and common sense. I trusted him completely. "Pete, I need to tell you something, and I need you to sit down first." I told him everything. The lockbox, the cameras, the cooking, the sleeping, the wine, the suitcase, the lock change. Pete was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then he said a word I won't repeat and followed it with, "That woman told me you gave her the keys. She said you asked her to house sit while you were gone." I believed her, Garrett. I'm sorry. "Don't be sorry. Be a witness." Pete agreed immediately. Then he told me something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You know the Harmons, Ted and Grace? They lived in the Blue Cape Cod on Whitaker Lane before they moved to Greenville. Brenda went after them hard. Fines every month, complaints every week. Ted went on a business trip for 3 weeks, and when he got back, things in the house were moved around. He couldn't prove anything, but he always said somebody had been inside. They sold 6 months later. The buyer was Brenda's cousin. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a pattern. And once you see a pattern, you can't unsee it. The engineer in me knew exactly what to do next. I called Ted Harmon the next morning. He picked up on the first ring, like he'd been waiting for someone to ask about this for years. "Garrett, I'm going to tell you everything, because nobody believed me when it happened." Ted's story was almost identical to mine. Brenda started with fines. Garden edging too close to the sidewalk. A holiday wreath left up one day past the rules. Then Ted went on a business trip to Atlanta for 3 weeks. When he came home, things in the house were different. Towels folded wrong. Food in the fridge he didn't buy. A coffee mug sitting in the dish rack that he'd never used. His wife, Grace, found a blonde hair on the master bathroom floor. They didn't have a blonde in the family. Ted said Grace stood in that bathroom, holding the hair between her fingers, and neither of them said anything for a full minute, because they both knew what it meant but couldn't prove it. Ted confronted Brenda. She laughed right in his face. "You're imagining things, Ted. Maybe the stress of all those violations is getting to you." He didn't have cameras. He couldn't prove a thing. Within 6 months, Brenda had the board slap a $15,000 maintenance lien on his house, and Ted couldn't afford the legal fight. He sold to Connie Drake, Brenda's first cousin, for $80,000 under market value. Dale personally ensured the Planning Commission approved every renovation Connie requested without a single public hearing. Then Ted told me about the Stevensons. an elderly couple on the north end of the street. Brenda fined them repeatedly for an unapproved garden structure, which was a handmade cedar birdhouse that Mr. Stevenson built for his wife on their 40th anniversary. Brenda called it a code violation and threatened daily fines. When the Stevensons pushed back, Dale flagged their property for a county drainage assessment that would have cost them $12,000 in engineering fees alone. They sold too. The buyer had a business relationship with Dale's firm. 2 families forced out. 2 properties purchased by insiders at below-market prices. The HOA used as a weapon. The Planning Commission used as a shield. Nobody ever connected the dots because each family left quietly, believing they were the only ones who'd been targeted. Warren didn't need more than 30 seconds. This isn't just trespassing anymore, Garrett. This is a pattern of fraud. Brenda pressures homeowners through the HOA. Dale blocks any complaints through his commission seat. And when someone resists hard enough, she escalates, apparently to the point of entering their homes. With the institutional cover Dale provides, that's conspiracy. I contacted the United States Postal Inspection Service about the mail forwarding. Within 48 hours, Special Agent Colleen Shaw from the Columbia Field Office called me back. Mr. Townsend, we've confirmed the change of address form. It was filed using your name and home address, but the signature doesn't match any sample we have on file. The P.O. box is registered to a B. Covington. That's sufficient for a federal mail fraud investigation under 18 U.S.C. 1708. The power had shifted, and I could feel it even from 1,500 miles away, sitting in a plastic chair outside my motel in Big Timber, watching the last band of orange sunlight sink behind the crazy mountains. The sky went from copper to violet in the time it took me to finish the phone call, and the air smelled like pine sap and cold granite. Brenda thought she was running the same playbook she'd used twice before. What she didn't realize was that this time, the target had cameras she never found, a lawyer building a case file, a retired cop across the street, 2 previous victims ready to testify, and a federal agent pulling postal records. The crack in the foundation had reached the load-bearing wall. The plan came together over 72 hours, most of it assembled between midnight and 4 in the morning, from a motel room that smelled like pine cleaner and burnt coffee. I kept the curtains open, because the Montana sky at 2 in the morning is the blackest thing you'll ever see. And somehow staring into all that darkness helped me think clearly about what was waiting back in South Carolina. Warren handled the legal architecture. He filed a criminal complaint with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office documenting 6 weeks of unauthorized entry, burglary in the first degree, destruction of property, and fraud. He included a USB drive with 31 time-stamped video files, a written timeline, and signed statements from Ted Harmon and Pete Gallagher. The sheriff's office assigned a detective and issued a warrant within 48 hours. Warren said the detective watched 2 minutes of footage and said, "This woman is living there like it's a vacation rental." On the federal side, Agent Shaw moved fast. The mail fraud complaint was straightforward. Forged change of address form, documented mail diversion, P.O. box in the suspect's name. But during the investigation, Shaw found something else. Brenda had used my home address to open a credit card, not a big-ticket card, a department store account, the kind you apply for at a register for a 10% discount. But the application listed my address as her residence, and that crossed the line from mail fraud into identity theft. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1028, aggravated identity theft carries a mandatory minimum of 2 years in federal prison, added on top of any other sentence. Brenda had upgraded her own charges without anyone asking her to. I booked a flight home for Friday, 2 weeks earlier than scheduled. I told my project supervisor I had a family emergency, which wasn't exactly a lie. I told no one else. Not Diane, not Ellie, not Pete, not yet. The element of surprise was part of the plan. Here's how it would work. Pete's house sits directly across the street from mine. His garage has a side door that faces away from my house, so people can enter without being seen from my front windows. On Friday evening, 2 sheriff's deputies and Agent Shaw would stage inside Pete's garage, starting at 6:30. I would arrive by 7, park 2 blocks away, and walk to Pete's house on foot through the back alley. Brenda's pattern was consistent. Every Friday evening, she hosted what she called her book club at my house. the same 4 women, the same wine, the same routine. The cameras confirmed it 3 Fridays in a row. She would be there, and she would have witnesses, not hers, but mine. I'd enter through my own back door. The spare key for the back door was on a hook inside the garden shed, not in the lockbox. Brenda never found it. She changed the front deadbolt but never touched the back. One door was all I needed. The idea was simple. Walk in, let her see me, let her react. Then the officers come in behind me. Agent Shaw serves the federal warrant. Brenda gets arrested in my living room, in front of her friends, while sitting on my furniture, drinking my wine. The visual would be undeniable. The evidence would be overwhelming, and there would be nowhere for her to hide. While Warren handled the criminal case, Pete handled the community side. The HOA bylaws required a 2/3 vote of homeowners to recall the board president. Out of 89 households, Pete needed 60 signatures to force a vote. He started knocking on doors 2 weeks before I came home. He wore a clean polo shirt and carried a clipboard of his own, a small detail he told me about later with a grin. "Figured I'd fight clipboard with clipboard," he said. He told each neighbor the truth, just the facts, no drama, and asked them to sign. 67 signed. Some had their own Brenda stories. One woman said Brenda fined her for putting a potted plant on her front step. Another said Brenda reported her teenage son's basketball hoop as a permanent, unapproved structure. A man on the corner said Brenda had his truck towed from his own driveway during a neighborhood meeting because it was lowering aesthetic standards. 9 years of petty tyranny, and the signatures practically collected themselves. One couple signed so fast, the pen nearly went through the paper. Another neighbor asked Pete if she could sign twice. Pete filed the recall petition with the board secretary, Ruth Delaney, on a Wednesday afternoon. Ruth was a quiet woman in her 60s who'd served on the board for 4 years and never once voted against Brenda. But when she read the petition and saw 67 names, something in her shifted. She processed it that same day. The legal case was airtight. The community was ready. The trap was set. All I had to do was walk through my own front door. Well, back door. While I was building the case from Montana, Brenda was settling into my house like she'd signed a 30-year lease. Day 35. The hidden camera in the hallway clock, the one Brenda didn't know existed, captured her rearranging my living room. She rotated the couch to face the bay window instead of the television. She moved the end tables. She dragged the reading chair Catherine had placed by the bookshelf into the corner and replaced it with a floor lamp she'd brought from her own house. Then she hung a framed print on the wall above the mantel, a watercolor of a beach scene that clashed with everything Catherine had chosen for that room. She stepped back, tilted her head, and smiled like she was decorating her own living room on a Saturday afternoon. Day 37 was worse. Brenda changed the Wi-Fi password. My remote camera access dropped out at 11 in the morning, and for 20 minutes I sat in my truck on a Montana logging road with no signal, stomach turning, wondering if she'd found the hidden units. She hadn't. The 3 concealed cameras, one inside the smoke detector in the guest bedroom, one behind the face of the hallway wall clock, and one built into a row of books on the office shelf, ran on local storage, recording to micro SD cards on a continuous loop. They didn't need Wi-Fi. They didn't send alerts. They just watched. And they caught everything. Day 38. An email landed in my inbox from the HOA. Official letterhead. Subject line, Notice of Property Maintenance Violation. Townsend G. The letter stated that my property had been found in violation of 7 maintenance standards, including failure to perform seasonal exterior care, evidence of interior neglect visible through windows, and extended owner absence without designated property management. The fine was $200 per day, retroactive to 2 weeks prior. Total due, $2,800. The letter was signed by Brenda Covington, President, Palmetto Bluff Estates, HOA. The woman living in my house was fining me for not taking care of it. That same afternoon, Brenda sent an email to the full board. I got a copy because I was still technically on the homeowner distribution list. The email read, "The Townsend property at 412 Sycamore Lane has been effectively abandoned for over 5 weeks. I recommend we begin the formal process for placing a maintenance lien. This protects property values for all homeowners and ensures community standards are upheld. Board member Larry Fitch, Brenda's reliable yes man for 6 years, replied within the hour. Seconded. They were laying the groundwork. The same playbook they'd used on Ted Harmon. The same playbook they'd used on the Stevensons. Fine, lean, pressure, sell. And the buyer would be someone connected to Brenda or Dale. They were trying to steal my house in broad daylight, while the owner watched from 1,500 miles away. Day 40. The one that nearly broke me. The smoke detector camera in the guest bedroom captured Brenda standing in the doorway of the master bedroom, my bedroom, talking on the phone. I'm telling you, Dale, this room needs to be redone completely. That green color is depressing. I'm having Troy come by tomorrow to paint it. The next morning, a man in paint-spattered clothes arrived with 2 5-gallon buckets. Brenda met him at the door. By noon, the master bedroom walls were pink. A dusty, muted pink that looked like the inside of a greeting card. The ceiling trim was white, the sage green Catherine had chosen, the color she'd picked from a fan deck at the hardware store after holding every shade up to the window light for 45 minutes, was gone in 3 coats. I watched the footage at 1 in the morning in my motel room. The only sound was the motel's ice machine humming through the wall and the blood pounding in my ears. For the first time in this entire ordeal, my eyes were wet. Not because of the color, because of what it meant. She was erasing Catherine from the house, room by room, object by object. She was replacing my wife's choices with her own like Catherine had never existed. I called Warren at 6 the next morning. How soon can we move? Friday. Everything's in place. 2 days. I just had to hold on for 2 more days. Then Agent Shaw called with one more thing. During the identity theft investigation, her team pulled Brenda's financial records. The credit card Brenda opened using my address? She'd also listed my social security number on the application. She'd found it in a file folder in my home office desk, the same desk the bookshelf camera had recorded her going through on day 29. Aggravated identity theft. Another federal felony. Another mandatory sentence. Brenda was stacking charges like firewood, and she had no idea the match was already lit. Day 41. Brenda found the first camera. The hallway clock unit caught it. Brenda was walking through the living room, carrying a basket of laundry, my laundry, pulled from the hamper in the master closet, when she stopped and stared at the smoke detector in the corner of the ceiling. She put the basket down, dragged a dining chair underneath it, climbed up, and pried the cover off with a butter knife. The camera was the size of a shirt button, nestled against the battery housing. She pulled it out, held it up to the light, and her face went through 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, rage, and fear. She crushed it in her hand and threw the pieces into the kitchen trash. Day 42. She found the second one. The kitchen camera was mounted inside a small decorative shelf above the stove. Brenda yanked it off the shelf, set it on the counter, and smashed it with the leg of a bar stool. Porcelain shards and circuit board fragments scattered across the granite. She swept them into the garbage with shaking hands. Then she called Dale. That sneaky little engineer had cameras in here. I found 2 of them. I destroyed both. Dale's voice came through tinny and tight on the hallway clock's microphone. Are you sure that's all? It's a 4-bedroom house, Dale, not the Pentagon. 2 cameras. I got them both. We're fine. They weren't fine. They weren't even close. 3 cameras were still running, and the hallway clock unit had just recorded Brenda destroying evidence and admitting on the phone that she knew she was in someone else's home. Destruction of property, consciousness of guilt, and now Dale was on tape too, fully aware of what his wife was doing and choosing to help cover it up. Day 43. Brenda pivoted from squatter to strategist. She called an emergency board session by email, claiming urgent property management concerns. The agenda had one item: a vote to classify 412 Sycamore Lane as abandoned property and begin the formal process for a forced maintenance lien leading to potential foreclosure sale. Larry Fitch drafted the resolution overnight. It cited 7 alleged violations, referenced Brenda's personal inspection of the property, which was technically accurate, just not in the way she meant, and recommended a 60-day compliance window with accelerating fines starting at $500 per day. If the fines weren't paid, the HOA could place a lien. If the lien wasn't satisfied, they could petition the court for a forced sale. The Harmon playbook, step by step. But Pete Gallagher had been busy too. The recall petition with 67 signatures was already filed. Ruth Delaney had logged it in the official HOA records 2 days earlier. Under the Palmetto Bluff Estates bylaws and South Carolina's Nonprofit Corporation Act, Section 33-31-702, a valid recall petition triggers a mandatory membership vote within 30 days. Brenda couldn't block it. She couldn't delay it. She couldn't pretend it didn't exist. Once those signatures were verified, the vote was happening, whether she liked it or not. Ruth told Pete about Brenda's reaction when she found out about the petition. She came into my kitchen without knocking, Pete, stood right there by the refrigerator and jabbed her finger in my face. She said, "Those signatures don't mean a thing. I am this neighborhood. I built it. And no piece of paper with 67 names is going to change that." But Ruth had already done something quiet and brave. She'd pulled the HOA's financial records for the past 3 years, records Brenda had kept in a locked filing cabinet in her own home, and found $47,000 in unexplained expenditures, payments to vendors with no invoices, reimbursements to Brenda's personal credit card for community improvement supplies that no one could locate, a $3,000 charge to a Charleston catering company for an event that never appeared on any HOA calendar. Ruth photocopied everything and gave the stack to Pete in a manila envelope on a Tuesday evening. Her hands were trembling when she handed it over, but her voice was steady. "I should have done this 3 years ago," she said. "I was afraid. I'm not anymore." Pete scanned every page and emailed them to Warren. Warren called me that night. "Garrett, we've got embezzlement on top of everything else. This woman has been looting the HOA for years. When this goes to trial, she's not just losing her title, she's losing everything." I was flying home in 2 days. The trap was set. The evidence was locked. The community was ready. Brenda was sitting in my house painting the walls and pouring wine and planning how to steal my property. She had no idea I was already packing my bag. Friday evening, 7:15. I landed at Charleston International with one carry-on and a heart rate I could feel in my fingertips. The low-country humidity hit me the second I stepped outside the terminal, thick and warm, carrying the salt mud smell of the marsh flats along the Ashley River. Montana had been cold and dry. Charleston felt like walking into a room where someone had been cooking all day. I drove surface streets, parked 2 blocks east on Magnolia Court, and walked through the dark alley behind Pete's property. Into his garage through the side door. Pete was by his workbench. 2 sheriff's deputies sat on folding chairs near the wall. Agent Colleen Shaw stood by the window with a folder and a badge on her belt. "Mr. Townsend, good to finally meet you in person." "Likewise, Agent Shaw. Ready?" "We've been ready since Tuesday." Through Pete's garage window, I could see my house across the street. Every window glowed warm. Porch light on, the one I'd switched off 6 weeks ago. Shadows moved behind the curtains. Laughter. Music. My house looked alive in a way it hadn't since Catherine was in it. Except Catherine had every right to be there. At 7:30, I crossed the street. Crickets screamed in the live oaks, the way they do in the low country when the air is thick enough to swim through. I went around the side, past the empty lockbox still hanging open on the wall, and stopped at the back door. The spare key was on a hook inside the garden shed, behind a bag of fertilizer, under a clay pot Catherine used for starting tomato seedlings. Brenda never found it. The key turned clean. I pushed the door open and stepped into my own kitchen. Smell hit first. Lavender candles and red wine and the buttery warmth of baked brie. Then sound. Women's voices, television murmur, ice clinking, someone laughing hard enough to snort. Then the visual through the kitchen doorway. 5 women arranged around my coffee table. Wine glasses, cheese board, a throw blanket on the sofa arm I'd never seen before. Brenda sat dead center, legs crossed, glass of red wine halfway to her lips, mid-sentence about something that made her friends laugh. I stepped into the doorway. "Evening, ladies." 5 heads turned. The room went silent, the way a room goes silent when someone walks into a funeral late. Brenda's smile didn't fall. It froze. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for 5 full seconds she didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. The wine glass hung in the air like time had stopped. Then she tried. "Garrett, you're back early. I was just checking on the house." "For 6 weeks, Brenda? Every night? You changed my locks. You painted my wife's bedroom pink." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. One friend stood up. "I think we should go. Nobody needs to leave just yet." 3 knocks on the front door. Firm, official. Deputy Hank Beaumont stepped in, badge visible. His partner followed. Agent Shaw came last, federal ID at shoulder height. "Brenda Covington? You're under arrest for burglary in the 1st degree, criminal trespass, and destruction of property." Brenda shot to her feet. Wine sloshed across the carpet. "This is ridiculous. I'm the HOA president. I have authority." "Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. I'd recommend you use it." Agent Shaw stepped forward. "Mrs. Covington, I'm Special Agent Colleen Shaw, United States Postal Inspection Service. You're facing federal charges for mail fraud and aggravated identity theft." Brenda's friends grabbed their purses and scattered. The deputies let them go. They weren't targets. Brenda stood in my living room, wrists out, mascara streaking both cheeks. "You can't do this to me. This is my neighborhood." Beaumont clicked the handcuffs. The sound was small, metallic, final. "Ma'am, this is his house, and you're standing in it without permission." They walked her out my front door. The porch light she'd turned on lit her face and the faces of a dozen neighbors who'd come out to watch the blue and red lights. Pete stood on his porch across the street, arms folded, and gave me one slow nod. As she passed me, I said it quiet, not for the crowd, just for her. "You were right about one thing, Brenda. Someone wasn't maintaining this property, but it wasn't me." The aftermath moved fast. Brenda Covington was charged at the state level with burglary in the 1st degree, criminal trespass, and destruction of property. In South Carolina, 1st-degree burglary carries up to 15 years. The federal charges, mail fraud, and aggravated identity theft, added a mandatory minimum of 2 additional years served consecutively. Her bond hearing lasted 12 minutes. The judge set bail at $75,000 and ordered her to surrender her passport. Dale Covington was placed under investigation by the South Carolina State Ethics Commission within a week. The pattern was undeniable. He'd used his planning commission seat to block complaints, fast-track insider approvals, and shield a scheme that had forced at least 2 families from their homes. He resigned 63 days later. The investigation continued anyway. Connie Drake was compelled to sell the Harmon property at fair market value as part of a civil settlement. Ted Harmon received $80,000 in damages on top of the sale. He called me the day the check cleared. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. The HOA held its recall vote on a Saturday morning in the community pavilion. 78 voted to remove Brenda. 3 voted against. 8 abstained. Pete Gallagher was elected interim president. Ruth Delaney became treasurer and cracked open the books. The audit uncovered $47,000 in unexplained spending. Phantom vendors, personal reimbursements, a catering bill for an event that never happened. Every dollar was referred to the sheriff's forensic accounting unit. Pete's first act as president was canceling every fine Brenda had issued in the past 18 months. 112 violations. Gone. The neighborhood exhaled for the first time in 9 years. I came home for good 2 weeks after the arrest, walked into the master bedroom, stared at those pink walls, and drove to the hardware store on Rivers Avenue. 2 gallons of paint, sage green, the same shade Catherine picked from a fan deck 7 years ago, holding every sample up to the afternoon light until she found the one that made the room feel like theirs. Ellie helped with the trim. We didn't talk much while we worked. When we stepped back and looked at the finished walls, she said, "It looks like Mom's room again." That was enough. 2 months later, I established the Palmetto Shield Legal Defense Fund, a nonprofit offering free legal help to homeowners facing HOA abuse, code enforcement overreach, or predatory lien schemes in Charleston County. Warren runs it pro bono. In the first 6 months, the fund helped 11 families. 3 avoided foreclosure. One recovered $22,000 in wrongful fines. That October, the neighborhood held a block party for the first time in 9 years. Brenda had always banned them, noise concerns and liability exposure. Pete approved the permit in 4 seconds. We closed Sycamore Lane, set up tables in the street, and ate pulled pork while the kids ran circles around the live oaks, and the sky over the Ashley River turned the color of sweet tea. Ellie played violin on the porch that evening. She chose the Meditation from Massenet's Taille, Catherine's favorite piece. The notes drifted across the lawn and down the street, and Mrs. Patterson stopped on the sidewalk and stood there with her hand over her heart until the last note faded. I sat on the porch step with a glass of lemonade, watching my daughter play music in the house my wife chose, in a neighborhood that finally felt like it belonged to the people who lived there. If you've ever had an HOA president who thought they owned your life, drop your story in the comments. I know I'm not the only one. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Because next week, I've got a story about a man whose HOA tried to condemn his barn. They didn't know he had a conservation easement, a county commissioner in the family, and a reporter on speed dial. Trust me, you'll want to hear it.